Today, the housing affordability elephant in the room. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Well, that is posts covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Well, there are many different ways of trying to figure out housing affordability metrics. One of the best is the Demographia report, which has just come out. And in a second, I'm going to take you through some of the key points. But before I do that, let me make these 2 points. Firstly, if you compare GDP to income or many of the other metrics that come out from, for example, the Bank for International Settlement, it's quite clear that Australia is way off the charts. Housing is way too expensive relative to income, relative to GDP. And I expect to see a lot of noise about this as we go into the election, but the noise will mostly focus on supply-side discussions. In other words, build more, encourage more people to buy, more home loan grants for first-time buyers, etc., etc. Yet, it does not address the fundamental structural issue that the Demographia report gets to. So, it is worth paying attention to this report, which has come out for a number of years and, frankly, is getting worse. And worse in terms of the results specifically for Australia. So, let's look at the Demographia International Housing Affordability 2022 edition. It's presented by the Urban Reform Institute and the Frontier Centre for Public Policy. Now, it's worth just taking account of what they say in the introduction. The report provides housing affordability ratings using the median multiple, which is a measure of income, in relation to housing prices for 92 major markets in metropolitan areas in 8 nations for the third quarter of 2021. As the pandemic and lockdowns continue into a second year, the movements of households from denser urban neighbourhoods to larger homes, often with large yards or gardens in suburban and outlying areas, has continued, and the result has been to drive up prices at unprecedented rates in many markets. As a result, many low-income and middle-income households who already have suffered the worst consequences from housing inflation will see their standards of living further decline. Housing affordability is particularly critical due to the strong increase in remote working or telework during the pandemic, which is accelerating the movement to more affordable places. And it will also likely help flatten or even reduce prices in the highest cost markets as other households seek less costly housing elsewhere. So now let's just talk about the housing markets that are covered. It includes Australia, Canada, China, Ireland, New Zealand, Singapore, United Kingdom, and the United States. And the data is based on the third quarter of 2021, which means, of course, that in some circumstances prices are even more extreme and therefore affordability continues to deteriorate. Now, in terms of how to assess housing affordability, it's, they say, sometimes evaluated simply by comparing house prices. But without the consideration of incomes, housing affordability cannot be assessed. Housing affordability is house prices in relation to incomes. So the Demographia International Housing Affordability uses this as the multiple medium to rate middle-income housing affordability. The median multiple is a price-to-income ratio of the median house price divided by the gross median household income. Price-to-income ratios have been widely used, such as by the World Bank, the United Nations, the Organization for International Cooperation and Development, the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University, and others. Median price and income measures better reflect the economic impacts on middle-income and lower-income households, as opposed to averages, which are skewed upward by the inclusion of the highest incomes and prices. And in fact, they rate them as 4 categories: affordable, with a median multiplier of 3 or less; moderately unaffordable, between 3.1 to 4; seriously unaffordable, from 4.1 to 5; and severely unaffordable, from 5.1 and over. And again, this is the median house price divided by the median household income. So, they say there have been a strong trend away from affordability. The number of severely unaffordable markets rose 60% in 2021 compared to 2019. That's the last pre-pandemic year. There were also more seriously unaffordable markets. At the same time, the number of affordable and moderate affordable markets declined by nearly 2/3. At the national level, the number of severely unaffordable markets increased by 2 in Canada, by 3 in the United Kingdom, and by 14 in the United States. But it's worth noting that Australia was the most significantly unaffordable across the country, with 5 in 2019, and it's still the same in 2021, only more so, as we'll see in a second. And they went on to say some markets have experienced exceptionally large median multiple increases in the 2 years since before the pandemic. For example, housing affordability deteriorated by 4.1 years of median household income in San Jose, which was nearly sufficient to purchase the median-priced house in 1996, compared to the present 12.6. Similarly, Sydney's increase of 4.3 median multiple points nearly equalled the need to purchase the median-priced house in 1986, well below the 2021 15.3. Now I want to pause here and just make the point that this survey highlights once again how deeply structural the housing affordability crisis is. And we will summarise at the end some of the reasons why this is the case. But let's let the data speak for itself. All of these increases are after prolonged housing affordability deterioration, which started in 1990, when national price-to-income ratios were affordable at 3 or less in Australia, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, United Kingdom, and the United States. And my point here is that the critical thing that changed was the factor of credit availability. Because in the 1990s, we had financial services deregulation, we had the opening of the taps in terms of income multipliers on mortgages, as well as extended durations. So essentially, huge amounts of additional credit was poured into the system, which allowed people to essentially borrow a lot more. And that ability to borrow more stoked prices significantly, which is why loan to GDP and loan to incomes are also now way off the scale. This is a credit boom-driven problem, in my opinion. So let's look at the 2021 summarizations of the housing affordability across the different nations. You can see there that Australia has 5 severely unaffordable, Canada has 4, as well as 2 moderately unaffordable. You can see that Hong Kong, Ireland, New Zealand, and Singapore also registered in the severely unaffordable category. And the United Kingdom had 11 severely unaffordable, 9 seriously unaffordable, and 1 moderately unaffordable, making 21 in total. And in the United States, of the total of 56 areas researched, 27 were severely unaffordable. So they say housing affordability in 2021 is considerably worse than before. There are now 5 times as many markets with median multiples of at least 10 as a decade ago, up to 11 from 2. The least affordable market is Hong Kong, with a median multiple of 23.2, followed by Sydney at 15.3, Vancouver at 13.3, San Jose at 12.6, and Melbourne at 12.1. On the other hand, the most affordable market is Pittsburgh at 2.7, followed by Oklahoma City and Rochester at 3.3, and Edmonton and St. Louis at 3.6. So now let's look at specific country data. We'll start with Australia. Australian markets have a median multiple of 8, up from 6.9 2 years ago, That's an increase of 1.1 years of median household income. All of 5 Australia's major housing markets have been severely unaffordable since the early 2000s. Sydney has the least affordable market with a median multiple of 15.3, the second least affordable market internationally, ranked 91st in affordability out of 92 markets. No market except Hong Kong has reached this level of unaffordability in the 18 years of the report. Since before the pandemic, Sydney median prices have risen 4.3 years of median household income. This 2-year increase alone is nearly equal to the 4.5 years of income required to buy the median price Sydney house in 1986. Now let's look at Melbourne. With a median multiple of 12.1, Melbourne is the 88th least affordable of the 92 markets. This elevated median multiple has only been reached before in Australia by Sydney. Perth is the most affordable market in Australia, yet it has a severely unaffordable median multiple of 7.1. Perth is the 73rd least affordable out of 92. And the affordability range between markets in Australia has widened materially from 2 median multiple points in 1981 to 8.2 in 2021. The range expanded substantially during the pandemic. In Canada, the markets have a median multiple of 6, up from 4.4. This increase of 1.6 years in median household income is the largest among included nations in the report. 4 of the 6 markets in Canada are rated severely unaffordable. Vancouver is the least affordable market in Canada with a 13.3 median multiple. That's up from 11.9 in 2019, an increase of 1.4 years. Toronto is the second least affordable market in Canada and ranks 83rd out of 92 markets. And overall housing affordability in Toronto has deteriorated precipitously by 6.6 median multiple points from 2004, when the median multiple was 3.9. Montreal and Ottawa are also severely unaffordable. The most affordable market is Edmonton, with a median multiple of 3.6. In Canada, the affordability difference among the 6 major markets was 1.5 median multiple points in 1971, rising to 2.5 in the mid-2000s, and during the pandemic it's risen to 9.3, more than 6 times that of 1971. Hong Kong is the least affordable market in the survey, with a median multiple of 23.2. That's an increase of 2.4 points from the 20.9 in 2019. Interestingly, half of this increase is due to lower incomes. And there are important proposals to increase the housing supply in Hong Kong to improve housing affordability. In Ireland, Dublin became severely unaffordable this year, with a median multiple of 5.7. In New Zealand, Auckland has a severely unaffordable median multiple of 11.2. That's up from 8.6 in 2019, an increase of 2.6 times the annual median household income. And Auckland ranks 85th in affordability out of 92 markets. Singapore's median multiple rose from 4.6 in 2019 to a severely unaffordable 5.8 in 2021, reflecting the impacts of the pandemic shock. And Singapore ranks 53rd in affordability out of 92 markets. United Kingdom has a 5.1 median multiple in 2021. That's up from 4.6 in 2019, equal to a 6-month increase in median household income. And there are 11 severely unaffordable markets, up from 8 in 2019. London is the least affordable market in the United Kingdom, with median multiples of 8, ranked 79th out of 92 in affordability. On the other hand, the most affordable market was Glasgow, with a median multiple of 3.8, ranked 7th in affordability out of 92. They say the United Kingdom has the longest experience with urban containment policy, yet house price increases have continued to race ahead of incomes. By 2020, median house prices rose 2.2 times relative to earnings in England and 1.9 times in Wales, and in London, the Greater London Authority, prices have more than tripled relative to earnings between 1997 and 2020. And finally, in the United States, the US median multiple is 5. That's up from 3.9 in 2019, an increase of 1.1 years of median household income. And there were 27 severely unaffordable markets in 2021 compared to 14 in 2019. California has the largest concentration of severely unaffordable markets, with 4 of the nation's 5 highest cost markets relative to income. The most costly among those is San Jose, at a median multiple of 12.6, ranking 89th out of 92. Honolulu has a median multiple of 12 and ranks 87th in affordability out of 92, and San Francisco has a median multiple of 11.8 and ranks 86th in affordability. And they go on to say that there is a broad view that deteriorating housing affordability is an existential threat to the middle class. They quote the OECD and other sources. It's not surprising in this environment many middle-income and low-income households have sustained deteriorating standards of living, and the causes of this do not bode well for the future. And here I just want to underscore, of course, my own stress analysis shows precisely this playing out. The housing issues, the big debts, and the inability to service them are putting massive pressures on individual households. And of course, first-time buyers have been encouraged to pile into the market thanks to government policy in the last couple of years to try and support the construction sector by a number of different incentive schemes that are getting them into ever greater debt. And we've now got to the point, in my view, where we are in the situation where households are simply not able to afford the loans they already have. Incomes remain compressed, cost of living are rising dramatically. And over the next couple of days, I will report further on my latest stress analysis, which does not bode well for the future. So just before I finish this show today, I will just walk through the overall table, which shows that the best place in terms of affordability is in the US, places like Pittsburgh and Oklahoma City, and they're ranked in order with deteriorating affordability going down the page. And you can see that Perth in Western Australia is sitting at 73rd, Brisbane at 76th, Adelaide at 79th, Auckland at 85th, Melbourne at 88th, and Sydney at 91st, just behind Hong Kong, which is the least affordable location. And here is another way of looking at the same information, where Australia is ranked there with Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney and Perth all on the list. And you can also see that Auckland is 85th. So the point I want to make is that there is a massive issue with housing affordability. And I want to depart a little bit from Demographia now, because they argue that a lot of this is due to what they call urban containment. In other words, not allowing sufficient supply of property or land for development. Now, that is a factor, but it is not the biggest factor. My thesis is that it is all about credit availability. The fact that loan sizes have grown dramatically, look at the latest data from the ABS. The fact that bank lending standards have deteriorated dramatically in recent years. The fact that competition for mortgages has gone through the roof. And the fact that even now, a number of lenders are discounting their variable rates to pull people into the market, as well as the government policies related specifically to first-time buyers and pulling demand forward. That's all part of the problem. And we are now at the tipping point where effectively affordability has got to the point where it's sucking too much of households' incomes out every month. There is very little prospect of real income growth in the next 2 to 5 years, in my view, particularly now with the pressures following the Ukraine situation and inflationary pressures very strong. And of course, the prospect is also of higher mortgage rates ahead. So we have a housing affordability crisis. But I'm betting that none of the major parties will want to talk about the underlying root cause. They will wheel out various supply side suggestions and short-term fixes, which will sound good ahead of the election. But unless we tackle the fundamental underlying issue, which is too much debt availability and too higher debt burdens on households, this is going to continue to deteriorate and get worse, with huge social implications, with huge economic implications, and by the way, with financial stability risks firing back on the banks in the years and months ahead. So this is a crisis that has been 30 years in the making, and I suspect that it's just bubbling to a head. Quite convenient, just before an election, eh? This is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.